Danielle won't be a direct hit, but this hurricane season already threatening to soak all U.S. taxpayers. FEMA now seeking a $19 billion bailout for U.S. flood zones as the storm season heats up. But Jonathan says it's time to ramp up some common sense here, and he's pointing to one home in Mississippi to make the point. Jonathan, what is that point?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's flooded 32 times in the last 34 years, and FEMA has paid something like $663,000 in claims over and over and over again. And unfortunately, once again, the government itself creates that moral hazard, because when you promise guaranteed coverage to everyone, as we do with the National Flood Insurance Program, it's not even insurance, it's another entitlement program. And you have, of course, not a free market, but a total disruption of the free market with wealthy people with second homes getting insurance. You have the whole market for the normal market for housing in that area disrupted. So we need to scrap the program, get the government out, and actually let a free market take hold.
Mark, let me give you an example here and give you a couple of numbers. USA Today, an analysis found that 19,600 homes in the area collected more than the home's value from this program.
I agree with everything Jonathan said until he said scrap the program. I have no sympathy for the people in Mississippi that are trying to rebuild again and again and again. And I'll tell you who's at fault: the Mississippi local officials, Governor Haley Barbour, that are letting them build not even 8 feet up, but letting them build on the ground again, and frankly raping the U.S. taxpayer to get our dollars. If local officials would require people to build safely, they wouldn't be stealing so much money. My sympathy, though, is for the people from my hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. That's nowhere near a floodplain, and they got wiped out, and that's why we still need these flood insurance programs.
But Tracy, this is something that's run by Congress. This is paid for by the taxpayer. I mean, we're talking about potentially abuse of the system by homeowners in the Gulf. Obviously, they've had a very difficult time, in particular over the last 5 years. But at some point, do we need to reevaluate this program, or, as Jonathan says, just scrap the program?
Well, look, I mean, dare I say, Mark makes a point that these people are unexpectedly hit. They need some sort of protection, because these people probably didn't have flood insurance to begin with. 5.6 million properties are covered under this program. But we do need to reevaluate when we keep coming back to the well over and over again, rebuilding in the same spots, rebuilding under code.
Tracy,
we need
Tracy,
to,
that's the whole point.
But what's the point,
Jonathan? We have insurance companies that insure violins, we insure body parts, we insure the weather.
Do you have flood insurance in Chicago? And you never know what could happen. And Jonathan, you're the one that says, you have always said, the government is there to protect me, One time, maybe, but that's it. You're there to protect me.
Wayne Rogers, I mean, look, they're getting discounts on their insurance rates. Again, this is a government-run program, taxpayer-backed. Maybe we need to reevaluate the system overall because of potentially the fraud that we're looking at that's been uncovered.
I'm not sure what the definition is of reevaluate, but yes, the system is flawed. You've got to go back to some part of saying that has to be risk-based. That is to say that just like a private insurance company or any other insurance company, there has to be risk involved. If you're going to do this over and over again, that's a corrupting of the system itself. Therefore, you say, okay, if we're going to have this program, and by the way, I agree that there should be some kind of a program, because you have a national disaster.
Why?
Let me finish. It's not just. Let me finish. It's not just hurricanes, my friend. It's also earthquakes. It could be an earthquake somewhere. It could be a major storm. It would give you something, because if it's a national emergency or something like that, then you need that for that. Now, it has to be administered. That's what you have to do.
Charlie?
Yeah, I would say one thing. There is a perfect analogy to what we're talking here, and this was the financial collapse. And I tell you, Jonathan is right about this. What happened was, when the government kept bailing out Wall Street over the years through lower interest rates every time they lost money, they created what he just said, moral hazard. There's no consequence to risk. That said, you know, poor people deserve, I think there is a way where you could be sort of constructively conservative on this without giving away the story. You know what I'm saying?
Just FYI, this insurance program is bankrupt. Wait until the national health care insurance program gets up and going. We'll see how well they do with that large government bureaucracy.
Mark, you know, the example I gave you earlier, the numbers that USA Today uncovered, those were primary homes, 300,000 secondary homes, vacation homes, rentals. I mean, this is also covered, Mark. Jonathan makes that point, wealthy people, but at the same time, I mean, these aren't even primary homes for folks. Should the taxpayer be supporting that?
I agree with you on that. I don't have sympathy for the secondary homes, for the homes in Hilton Head, South Carolina. They get flooded all the time. I do have sympathy for primary homeowners in places like Nashville that aren't prone to floods. We definitely need FEMA. I'm all for getting rid of the corruption and fraud. And thank God for Barney Frank and for preventing the Wall Street bailouts from ever happening again.
Okay, well, we're actually talking about the Gulf Coast, everybody.
What? Where'd you get that one from?
But anyway, Wayne, let me go back to something. I know that you know housing very, very well, and I know that you look at values and pricing across the country. What is your assessment of the Gulf Coast? Do you think that maybe we need to look and see if maybe there should be some stopping to the down there? Maybe it's an idea.
No, building, as you know, is all local, and there are rules and regulations about where you can build. You can't build in a floodplain. You can't do those kind of things. Yes, those have to be enforced. That's all. It's in the administrative part of this program where the difficulty is. If the program itself is fine, it's administrating, and it's the same thing about everything else. And just for the record, Barney Frank didn't know the first thing about what he was doing. He hasn't stopped.
Well, he created the crisis. He was the guy that helped bail him out.
So don't tell me about Barney
But you know what,
Frank.
Cheryl, to Jonathan's point, unfortunately, relying on the government to do anything correct these days is like me relying on my 5-year-old to get dressed without a problem in the morning. And so or she's 6, 6-year-old to get dressed without a problem. So you can't, and that's where I understand he's coming from.
Thanks to all of you. All right, guys, coming up, fasten your seatbelt. The government's Cash for Clunker program, designed to help the middle class, now is backfiring on the middle class. Find out why.
I stole a kiss at the turn of a mile. My curiosity running wild. Cruising and playing the radio.
Americans getting clunked by the government's Cash for Clunkers program. Remember that one? It was designed to help the middle class buy cars. Well, now we're learning it's backfiring on the middle class and helping drive up prices for used cars by as much as 30%. Now, Tracy, you were one of the first people to warn about this.
Look, it's the unintended consequences of government intervention. They did not allow the free market to work, did not allow inventory to work itself out. Cash for Clunkers pulled clunkers back. People cash them in. Now you go out looking for a used car, you can't find one. Prices are up about 30% because there is a shortage. This is what happens when the government puts its sticky fingers where it doesn't belong.
Mark, let me give you some examples here. I love giving you numbers today. I don't know what's going on, but look at this. These are popular cars. Look at this. The Cadillac Escalade, higher by 30%. The Chevrolet Suburban is higher by 34%. A Dodge Grand Caravan. These are cars that every family in this country drives, or plenty of them do anyway. So how can you say that Cash for Clunkers was a success?
Cheryl, the success brings all our stories together. First of all, we get all these energy inefficient cars off the road. That helps climate change. We don't have the floods that devastated Nashville and recently Pakistan. It also shows that when demand goes up for new cars, people hire jobs. So I want new cars to be made. I want more jobs out there. Demand causes jobs.
But you know what, Mark? Why do you think?
I'm all about the floods in Pakistan.
That is the most irrational.
That's my number one priority.
You know, Mark makes a good point here in this sense because he helps us demonstrate how absurd he is.
Okay, good.
Let's look at it this way. Why do you think people couldn't afford homes in the 1990s and the last decade?
Because all the money went to the rich people?
No. Here's why. Because Barney Frank and Chris Dodd made it so easy to get a mortgage that they drove up the average price of a home, and you couldn't buy a home unless you took out one of those crazy subprime mortgages. Barney Frank and Chris Dodd priced the middle class and the working class out of normal home buying.
Wow.
30 years loan, 20% down, because they couldn't afford it. So that's what your guys did. That's the great
right.
There's no different, and there's an analogy to that and what's going on with this.
Mark, you ponder that for a second, because I want to ask Wayne about this one, because I think it's kind of basic here. The argument basically is that you've got less supply, so prices go up. Huh?
I don't think it's as easy as that. I think there's something else much more subtle going on. Namely, why didn't they bail out the apparel business? Why didn't they, for example, let me trade in my blue blazer here for a new one and all of that? Why didn't they bail out these other industries? The real reason is that the automobile industry at that time was suffering, and the administration owed the UAW votes. That's exactly what happened. The UAW came out and supported the administration. This was a payoff to the union and a payoff to the automobile industry.
And Wayne, it was a tremendous success, wasn't it? Look at GM
Mark,
now.
actually, GM and Chrysler are in a lot better shape than they were.
Hey, listen, I still got my coat. Why don't you buy my coat, my friend?
And FYI, GM still owes us $43 billion. Cheryl, this was a wealth
millions of jobs
transfer
are saved
scheme.
and not people going homeless.
And not one created this year. This cost everyday taxpayers $20,000 to subsidize the purchase. Yes, people bought energy-efficient cars, Mark. Most of them could afford buying the cars in the first place. Charlie's exactly right. Essentially what this does, this front loads sales. And whether it's houses, whether it's cars, once the stimulus goes away, markets reflect reality.
Jonathan, if millions of people were fired, it would cost
Tracy,
you more in
Mark,
welfare.
if I can't afford a $15,000 used Dodge Caravan, how am I going to afford a $41,000 Volt that gets me to the corner barely, and I got to plug the thing back in? Makes
the point
no
is, as
sense.
demand goes up, people hire jobs. I want increased demand.
Mark, you created a clunker bubble.
All right. Thanks, guys. Interesting. Coming up, a GOP leader calling for the president to fire his entire economic team. But someone here says there's only one guy you need to give the boot to give stocks a boost again.